I've got to ask the question, is Apple dead? Hey folks, my name's Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. If this is your first time here, welcome. And I talk about tech stuff all the time. If you want to hear more about that stuff, you can subscribe. And you can like this video if you are interested in my opinions and they resonate with you at all. Commercial over. Today I find myself having to ask the painfully honest question, are we seeing the death of Apple happening right before our eyes? The other day, news broke that Apple stock dropped more than 2% after Apple cut orders for the iPhone 8 by something like 50%. This marks the first time Apple has ever cut orders for an iPhone this early in the cycle. Let's remember that the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus were just released a few weeks ago. Seeing how the iPhone typically has more demand than it does supply, I found this to be shocking. Yes, people are waiting for the iPhone X. And most likely, a lot of stockings will go unstuffed by that particular device. And then there are the reports that the iPhone 7 is actually outselling the iPhone 8, even though the iPhone 8 is a better phone in many, many ways. Maybe iPhone 8 sales will jump during the holiday season when supplies of the X are exhausted and wait times are into the months instead of days or weeks. But the question remains. Apple has seemed unstoppable in the 10 years since the iPhone was released. And even before, they were selling iPods and computers that were better than anything they'd offered in the previous cycle. Apple became a style as much as a product, and every product had that similar look and feel that seemed everything just to hold together. And over the years, Apple became a lifestyle brand. They've made products that are both powerful and easy to use, and they won over a huge segment of the population. But over the past few years, they seem to have lost something. And it may only be noticeable now that the failures and missteps have started to mount post-Steve. But in the wake of this latest iPhone setback, and in the wake of products that have not quite lived up to expectations over the past several years, I wonder, have we seen the last of the Apple that Steve Jobs built up until his death in 2011? Is Apple done? It's been 6 years since Tim Cook took over the company, and I want to take a look at some of the products Apple has released since that time, just to see if we can divine a pattern that might shape up into something. Let's start with the Imac line. The design of the Imac has changed over the years, but it's remained the same since 2012, when it first went with the super slim sides, and it's got the same screen size offerings, same huge bezels, same fat chin. And there were several years in there when they were putting 5,400 RPM hard drives in lower end models. And that made them really nothing more than a giant table-bound laptop, and a low-end one at that. And let's not even start to discuss the price gouging that begins to occur as you try to replace those inferior parts with actual usable parts. Whether it's just an SSD or 16 gigabytes of RAM, you're looking at hundreds of dollars to upgrade when you have to do it through Apple because they soldered everything to the motherboard. The pieces cost a fraction of the price. It was only until this year with the 27-inch model that they gave you the option to put in memory yourself. Can't change the hard drive too easy. It's buried underneath everything. But I did applaud Apple for that low-end 27-inch model for offering specs that could tackle light professional tasks. But later this year, we're getting the iMac Pro, which does offer professional specs, but at a price that is absolutely insane. The base model will cost $5,000. It's touted as the most powerful iMac ever built, and that may be true. But for $5,000, you could build two PCs that would rival the power of that machine and still afford two cheap UHD monitors The folks in Cupertino absolutely lost their minds. But that iMac Pro will sell. If there's one thing that we've learned from Apple over the last decade, it's price and performance don't have to match if the product looks great. And this one's black, or whatever they're calling space gray these days. So it'll fly off shelves as if it costs $5 instead of $5,000. But what about their Pro computers? That used to be a huge portion of their business, and creative professionals could basically use nothing but Macs to get a lot of their work done. And they were happy because those machines were generally great. I still have a 2006 cheese grater MacBook Pro sitting right down here. And I got it off eBay for $150, and I could still do music production on it as much as I want for as long as I want. You can put as many hard drives in it as it can handle. Change the RAM, all that kind of stuff. The current Mac Pro, however, is another story. Released in 2013, it was a bold step forward in design, purported to offer the same kind of power and performance as the previous models, but with a much smaller, albeit weirdly attractive shape. And last May, Apple, who originally touted that product as proof that they could still innovate post-Steve, admitted that the trash can Mac Pro was a mistake. And there are plenty of stories out there of professionals who spent ridiculous amounts of money on one, only to find that it had thermal issues that were baked into the design. It has barely been refreshed since its release in 2013 because of these thermal issues. Now, Apple has promised to support their professional users better in the future, and the iMac Pro is supposed to be a stopgap for that market, but professional users were the folks that kept Apple afloat when the ship was sinking. It's been a long, cold half-decade or so for them and myself as we watch Apple become a phone company. What about their laptop offerings? Everything seemed to be okay on that front until this year, maybe a couple of years ago. I have a 2015 MacBook Pro that does everything that I need it to do. It has all the ports that I need, and it's great. But starting with the MacBook, which is basically like a netbook with colored aluminum skins, Apple started taking ports away. This is when they first started telling us how brave they were. To move forward into the future, they went to USB-C only, and that carried over to the Pro line this year. And anyone who wanted to use their old gear with their new computer had to embrace the dongle life. And the extra couple of $100 it cost on top of the already high price of the machines to live that life. Let's not even get into the touch bar. That thing is a curiosity at best, and it cost an extra $300 on top of the price of a non-touch bar Mac Pro. I will be very surprised if the 2018 MacBook Pros have a touch bar. Really surprised. Now that brings us back around to the main body of Apple's business, the iPhone. Yes, there's the iPad and Apple TV and all those other things that Apple does on the side. But Apple lives and dies by the iPhone. I went on record in a video a couple of weeks ago stating that the iPhone 8 Plus is the best all-around smartphone you can buy right now. And for the majority of people, that phone has everything that they need, and it is a joy to use. Yes, there are phones that offer more features. They're arguably better phones in one way or another. But to me, the 8 Plus is the best all-arounder, and I stand by that. But this year, Apple wasn't satisfied with just making a great phone. They wanted to do something really special. They wanted to create a new price tier for their phones. And they wanted to use the 10th anniversary of the iPhone as a smokescreen to do it. But things haven't exactly gone as planned for the iPhone X. Production delays, supply shortages, and then the epic fail of the Face ID at the launch event. They've taken away one of the best features of the iPhone, the Touch ID, and replaced it with facial recognition that may or may not work reliably. It may or may not be legal, depending on how they decide to use the information. Only time will tell. They are using inferior screens to the competition. Yes, it's OLED, but it's inferior to everything else that Samsung makes. The list goes on. Now, granted, the iPhone X could come out and be proof, like the trash can Mac Pro, that Apple can still innovate. Or it could be proof that Apple really died with Steve Jobs in 2011, and we've just been watching the long withering on the vine. Of all the things that Apple's taken away over the last 6 years, the one that galls me the most is the removal of the headphone jack on the iPhone 7. Apple again made bold claims of their courage in doing so, but I see a different explanation. See if you can follow me here. Apple bought Beats in 2014 for $3 billion. It's obvious they saw a lot of potential money to be made, and maybe that money could be made if they switched all their customers over to a different paradigm for listening to music. They needed wireless, and they got it. They needed some tech. They needed some time. But in 2016, it finally happened. They told us that the 3.5 millimeter jack was outdated and inferior.
It really comes down to one word: courage. The courage to move on, do something new that betters all of us.
That was the hard, brave decision they needed to make to move us all forward. But wireless headphones still don't sound as good as wired headphones at any price level. Apple sure does like to sell us those wireless headphones, though, don't they? Just look at the AirPods. They actually may be proof that Apple can still innovate, and they are super impressive. But the EarPods that come in the box with your iPhone sound better. They do. If you don't believe me, try it out for yourself. How is that going courageously forward? It's not. It's a cash grab. But that's business. And that's been the disease that's been killing Apple since Steve Jobs died. He was a lot of things, good and bad, but he was the heart of that company. You see, Steve Jobs loved music, and the iPod was a sea change product. And over the years, it got better, it sounded better, and Jobs just absolutely loved to tout that you could carry 1,000 songs in your pocket. Like it was a feat of real magic. Steve Jobs would have never allowed the headphone jack to be removed from the iPhone, the child of his baby, the iPod. When I look at that blank space where the jack used to be, that's how I know Apple is dead. We've been watching it happen slowly, but it's been dead since 2011. I've been an Apple user since my first Performa computer way back in the early 90s. I admired their products. I've spent a lot of money on their products. But in the wake of everything I've discussed here, I can't ignore what's plain to me now, and it makes me really sad. Apple is dead. And maybe there's no coming back. Thanks for watching. Come back again. My name is Jason, again, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Painfully honest thoughts about the state of Apple in 2017. Until the next time, I'm out.